0 Hour, prequel to the Order of the Dragon series. Written by Tina Glasneck. Read by Liz Brand. For the red pickup truck, laughter, and Elroy. Chapter 1. Leslie. I had the solution to my grief. Resurrection. Draped in black, and after taking what seemed like a plane, train, and automobile to upstate New York, my sister and I arrived for a sad goodbye. There was no fun in funerals. We didn't get together with Tennessee whiskey, T-shirts with the family name airbrushed in bubble letters, or to play spades. There would be some red plastic picnic cups to hide all of the alcohol, though, as we sought a way to come to terms with death. It seemed so final. Seemed being the key word. There would be cigarette smoke wafting in the stagnant air, as some played old R&B music as a last goodbye to the man who used to be a cornerstone of the community, before his downfall into hedonism. My gran forced me to go, although he'd been spiteful, mean as a hornet, and sometimes just no good. I often felt sorry for his wife. His real wife, and not all of the women he sought to wife up without papers. Luckily, my mother had escaped from him when she could, and thrived. But I couldn't say the same for the rest of those whom he touched. The family seemed cursed, like they'd sacrificed one pig too many. Instead, in New York City, my side of the family had it made. His wealth, which had disappeared, many thought he'd hidden in the walls of the old family home that happened to come my way, probably through Gran's intervention. The others might not have been my full family by blood, but Gran was. She was the only relative who still lived, too stubborn to pass on to the other side, and I was grateful for that. At least they aren't getting rid of his body at the landfill. My sister, Claudine, knew just what to say. The family was still reeling from the sudden accident. The family's patriarch had gotten up on Saturday morning to make a quick run, and returned in a body bag. They said accident, but the author in me thought murder. Lord knew there were enough people who wanted to kill him. Tonight was the unsanctioned requiem, instead of the Southern wake Dad had wished for, according to Southern tradition. After all, you could take a Southerner from the South, but you couldn't replace it with the poppycock of the North. However, there was a compromise. A Catholic priest waited in the wings to lead the service in the funeral home's chapel. I swooshed into the chapel. My black leather coat fluttered behind me, a black lace veil over my face, behind which I hid, while my spiky heels stabbed the carpet. Claudine squeezed my hand and took a seat in the back, probably to ensure we weren't going to be locked in. She trusted this side of the family as much as I did. Not one bit. There was more regret in this room than what any of the floral arrangements might have otherwise said. Expensive sprays rested on the casket, while standing, singular flower arrangements tried to convince those gathered that his family loved him. He'd grown up in that South Carolina dirt, in a world where hoodoo and juju raced through the bloodlines. That was a part of the oral tradition. However, there was still something that needed to be done to help him move on, or he'd be stuck on this side to wander. And he'd suffered enough. Bypassing my weeping, gun-toting family on the first 2 rows, my heart thudded in my ears like a bass drum. I clenched the holy oak stake in my hand, hidden in my coat's folds. This act would cement my fate. It would cement what it meant to be the black sheep of a family who lacked all faith in the supernatural. Was I ready? My father's wife's scorn-filled gaze rested on me, and between her sobs and shaking shoulders, I wasn't sure if she was going to force me to leave or have my brother shoot me. I wouldn't allow their lack of faith to chain Dad to this world, to jail him to this plane where they'd abused him. Death's burden wasn't anything I could undo. There was nothing I could say that could make this right. His soul, though, I would not allow to be damned. Taking a deep breath while the organ music lightly played, I closed my eyes, and the room disappeared, remembering what the holy book said. I couldn't go with him, but I would make it so he could finally be free. Wasn't that what every child wished for their loved ones? I stood next to the open mahogany coffin that gleamed as if freshly polished. Therein rested the man I'd called father. His body hardened by the embalming fluid. Thick makeup covered up the damage from the car accident. I leaned over him and kissed his forehead, whispering the holy incantation. This is the only way. Raising my right hand, holding the stake, I swung my arm back and stabbed him in the chest. A loud noise, like that of a balloon releasing its air, filled the room. All sobbing stopped, turning into a shrilling chorus. The organ ceased its solemn playing. I could hear the commotion around me, but I remained focused on my dad. The spell required my full concentration. Hands attempted to pull me away. I shrugged them off. Phew! I sighed and raised my hands in prayerful supplication. May your soul... Then, with a loud whoosh, my lineman brother tackled me, knocking me down like I was a quarterback. The holy stake clattered to the floor. Get off me! I yelled. I pushed at my brother's shoulders, kicking my feet. Hold her down, I heard Dad's wife order. My fight left me with the sound of an unearthly moan coming from my dad's coffin. Out of the way! I pushed myself up. He's barely alive. The sound of a gun being cocked cut through me. I turned to see my father's wife holding her favorite firearm. No! I screamed. But it was too late. As though in slow motion, I watched her pull the trigger. The father I'd just awakened collapsed back into his casket, knocking it to the floor, where it shattered. Shit! I fell to my knees at his side, all life gone. Now how am I supposed to wake him back up? Chapter 2. Killian. Vampires would wipe themselves out with their latest Darwin Award-winning stunts if things continued. Under the night sky, stars twinkled in the distance. The nearby streetlights flickered off. Darkness rolled forward. The Order's tank and silver-lined van pulled forward, offering backup if needed. Killian, decked out in all black, kicked down the apartment's door. The wood splintered, and he and his team from the Order moved in. Their flashlights lit up the dark room, landing on the silhouette of a 6-foot dandy. In the blinding light, Killian watched the rainbow-tinged blood drip down the high vampire's chin onto his white cravat. His unicorn shifter victim, now gray, lay lifeless at his feet, next to his ebony cane. Looks like it was an all-you-can-eat buffet, Killian quipped. What can I say? The vampire removed his handkerchief and wiped his mouth as if he'd just finished the most succulent Sunday dinner. I'm a sucker for a good urban legend. The fables and myths were real. Vampires existed, and some still believed that the blood of a unicorn could heal their deadly condition, cure them of death, as it was said to do with poisons and water. Of course, unicorns had suffered persecution since the Pope bought a horn in 1560. With capitalism came the tug-of-war of supply and demand. London pharmacies propagated supernatural healing better than any proselytes. The desperate latched onto it like opium, long before the Opium Wars. Most didn't test the bought ground unicorn horn. The placebo effect lasted as well as the devil held his halo. But on the black market, there was a real danger. Monsters hunted them, and if vampires could find one alive, they paid a pretty price, even higher than some smaller nation's gross national product. They were still hunted for their magical properties. There were always those attempting to win stupid prizes. Unicorns didn't heal vampires any more than fey blood did. However, the blood could cause a vampire rage akin to a normal zombie Tuesday. It removed the vampire's striking beauty, showing the true monster beneath. That's what happened to Nosferatu, at least. Without some beauty, starvation was on the horizon, or something else to goad-feed the idiocy. Still, he knew it to be true. Vampires were after magic. When he was younger, he'd often questioned what magic was, or what it did. Was he a man who'd magically changed, or a man who'd magically morphed into a wolf? Family was complicated. His mother was the queen, his father the king, and magic was what kept them together and created him. Surely it was also what others feasted on to thrive. Killian couldn't kick the feeling that this was more than just a vampire getting too high and then attacking a unicorn shifter near the castle. Too much of a coincidence for his liking. He and the third in command, Rose, with the proper title of Detective Inspector, stalked down the castle's corridor, toward the dungeon where the latest vampire arrival would be waiting for interrogation. Usually, she'd be the Order's supernatural liaison, but tonight she seemed dead set on getting answers. Rose's long, strawberry blonde hair whipped behind her as she turned her attention to him. "We have to tell Alistair." As long as he'd known Rose, she'd always been a bone crusher, never one to evade a good fight. If she didn't want to talk to Alistair, there were more reasons than just that of the vampires. Luck must have been on her side, as Alistair was in the ether, communicating with the Queen in the Dragon Realm, allowed admission not only as her brother, but as the head of the Order of the Dragon. "The vampiric activity is off the charts," Killian agreed. Killian and Rose were both dressed in the standard Gothic black of the Order. Rose's sword was sheathed to her back, and Killian's holy daggers lay tucked inside his jacket, concealed but easily accessible. The castle near Edinburgh was isolated enough, and properly warded that it didn't cause a stir when black Humvees and vans passed through the ancient walls. This was only one of the magical prisons, innocuous in appearance, until one took a deeper look. Runes were carved into the ancient stones, warding off any unwelcomed visitors. "Because you don't want to see him again? Technically, this is your area of expertise. The vampires have been under your purview for decades." The breakup had been messy between Rose and Alistair, and Killian had no desire to step between them and their mess. Shit always flowed uphill, and he knew how to avoid it. They finally stood before the newly captured vampire's cell. "You'll never get rid of all of us," the vampire snarled, held tightly in his magical silver cuffs, of which Killian held the key. It was just another ordinary day in working for the Order of the Dragon, protecting this world from the supernatural one that needed to remain hidden. "Shut your noise," Killian said. "You should be happy that you're still breathing, instead of dead. Twice." For the past fortnight, vampire activity had been a pain in his hide. This latest capture didn't bode well for what should have been a time of peace. "Another killer? Mindless, even." Rose, the head of the Order's security, sidled up to him. Killian nodded. "But this one seems to be different from before. It is like a sickness spreading. Something or someone is tapping into some ancient magic here." "And do what with it? Releasing a sickness?" The world of the supernatural was hidden to normal humans. The ley lines were drawn, and due to the hierarchy, their world was nowhere near a republic or democracy. Ruled by the strong hand of monarchs, guided by the council, guarded and policed by the Order, those of the supernatural had one thing to do: kneel or die. Such a threat usually worked, but something or someone had shaken things up. The Fae buzzed with gossip in their courts. Wereshifters took to the woods, sniffing it out. The vampires stalked new victims, and the unicorns just got stabby. Killian knew it was something he'd have to bring up with the prince, his Uncle Alistair, the commander of the Order, who was also like a brother. There were certain rules for the supernatural, and those included not drawing unwanted attention to them. It looked like the vampires were casting the rules into the fire. "The games have only just begun," the vampire cackled, "and no one will be safe from the bloodletting. We've even found the connection to the key. The rightful queen, Asgeir, will rise again, and there is nothing you can do to stop it." Asgeir. That was a name he hadn't heard in centuries. The former dragon queen who'd been toppled by his mother. However, she was dead. There could be no resurrection for her. This vampire's arrest accounted for the third one in the past hour. Killian moved closer to the vampire, who was dressed in a leather jacket, and patted him down. He'd expected to find maybe a vial of the drug they'd been using, called temptation. With one hit, it made vampires who were law-abiding to the Order's rules feral. The supernatural world was hidden, and was to remain so. But what he pulled out wasn't a packet of the maroon crystal substance, but a commercial plane ticket to New York. "What's this?" Killian asked the vampire, holding up the printed-out plane ticket. The vampire laughed in response. Rose removed a blue, marble-sized orb from her pocket and dropped it at the vampire's feet, where a sigil formed. "I compel you to speak the truth, vamp," she ordered, "or be purged by the eternal blue fire." The vampire looked between them. "You have a thing for taking out vampires," Killian stated matter-of-factly. There was no diplomacy with this. That was what it meant to be a prince, the son of the Dragon Queen, and responsible for making sure all of the supernatural world towed the line. The Order required those who broke the law to be placed in holding until their hearing, where Alistair would decide their fate. "Blech, I don't like them. They're like cockroaches in an infestation we don't need. They put us all at risk." "You won't harm me," the vampire continued to chuckle. "That goes against the convention and that whole torture thing." Torture wasn't usually in their toolbox, but they would do all that was required to get answers, as decreed. "So you think?" Rose snapped her fingers, and blue flames rose within the sigil. The flames lapped at the vampire's jeans. He hopped from one foot to the other. "Tell us," Rose said. Her voice didn't rise, and instead, a stone-cold glint settled in her gaze. "Ah! Ah!" the vampire screamed. "Need more heat?" Rose raised her hand, and the higher it rose, the higher the flames grew. The smell of charred flesh wafted around the room until the air purifier came on, sucking up the odoriferous air. "Next comes the ultraviolet light," Rose stated. Okay. I'll talk, but you are guaranteeing my second death." He took a deep breath. "We've been summoned to New York City." "Why New York?" Killian asked. "It's not for food. Someone opened up the book. We have to show up. It is like being drafted." "The book?" "The Book of Abomination. It awakens us, calls us, and now all vampires must report." Rose gasped, and Killian clenched his teeth. That grimoire was to speak to the dead. In the wrong hands, it acted as a beacon to summon them. This event might mean catching up with his blood brother, Leaf, who'd know more. Not something he looked forward to, however. Every family came with drama. Why should a supernatural one be any different? "And if you don't report?" Killian asked. The madness will strike, and we will kill anything and everyone. This would be the beginning of the outbreak, unless they got the grimoire and put a stop to this. Opening the grimoire was akin to spreading a virus that only the dead were susceptible to. A deadly virus spread by magic. Both Killian and Rose stepped back, and the ultraviolet force field turned on, securing the vampire in his holding cell. Who was heading to New York? It had to be something they both were thinking. Okay, one game of wolf, dragon, witch, and that will decide. The game was much like rock, paper, scissors, but a play on all of their roles. The dragon could defeat the wolf the witch, the dragon. Wolf, dragon, witch, wish, they said in unison. Rose played the witch, and Killian the wolf. No surprise there, Killian. You better go pack. Chapter 3. Leslie. Would life be easier if I were a man? The spell didn't work, and no matter what I did, nothing seemed to make that magic work. I have heard it all before. You start down that road and you end up manless. Gran fluttered around me as if she were a pesky fly. She wrung her ghostly hands. Your sins will find you, and only the gods know what they'll do out there on those mean streets. Would my Gran still be nagging me about settling down? Ugh. I closed the old grimoire I'd borrowed from the library in the occult section. Every night I'd found something to read, to practice with. Besides seeing shadows in my bedroom that didn't correspond to Gran's movements, nothing had happened. It was my secret, and even Gran had no idea. You could settle down with the great guy at the Nigerian place. You always say that when you come in, he tells you that you're beautiful and that he loves you. I chuckled in return and pictured that handsome man. Jordan loved everyone. Former military, he'd returned to the city that never sleeps with joy in his heart and knowledge of international cuisine. Dreadlocks usually caressed his strong, square face that I didn't mind looking at. My stomach rumbled on cue. Maybe I could place an order? It wasn't that Jordan wasn't my type. He was supposedly single, available, and able. Of course, Gran had spoken to his dead auntie who haunted the building over to get the 411 on him. New York City was filled with men. It was a cosmopolitan, similar to an international buffet. Whatever your taste, you could find it here. From men bound to fetish lifestyles and dressing in shiny latex, to those in fancy high-rises, it all lay open here. They were like the subway. Another ready to come in 3 minutes. But men also caused problems and could make me miss my next book deadline. I desired a new man like a pint of ice cream. I'd love nothing more than to dive into the spectacular and scrumptiousness, but I'd prefer to do it with a tablespoon while wearing yoga pants and watching Netflix. It wasn't like I needed a man. I paid my own bills, bought whatever I needed and sometimes wanted, and could even order in when I wished, almost always. I was making it in the most expensive city and still surviving. No. Men brought heartache, misunderstanding, and, more often than not, lies. I don't know what you're doing when you ward your room, Gran continued, but you're up to no good, and it's going to bring a gauntlet of pain down on this family. Gran had a way of being overly dramatic. If I'd had a fainting couch for her to collapse on, I'm sure she would have used it. But it couldn't matter. This was something I had to do on my own, and using the grimoire was the only way. Even now, that thing vibrates with bad juju. Trust me, I know what that means. More than what's normal here in New York? I laughed. It sounded brittle to me. Forced. If this worked, then I'd reveal everything. I needed it to conjure the dead. The recently departed, to be exact, and no amount of warning was going to put off this ritual. Tonight was the night I resurrected the dead. Those mean streets were New York City, Manhattan streets to be specific, and the same streets I'd called home since childhood. Everyone else seemed to be able to leave our apartment, finding something new, but when I ended up going to college, I'd taken over the family apartment, and it wasn't letting go. I had more problems than men problems might imply. It came with rent control, and the prior owner, who kindly reminded me that my life was not adventurous enough, or at least not that of a superhero. My Gran. I have to get down to the esoteric shop if I plan on getting the henbane for the ceremony, I said. Something went wrong last time. I was truly meta about research in making sure that my characters and their experiences were true. You used parsley. I told you that wouldn't work, but you have to be careful with this spirit work. You don't know what you're doing, and you're not quite listening. Sunflower told me that she'd show me the right way, with golden light, orbs, and grounding. It was the best answer I could come up with. But it wasn't parsley. Parsley didn't open up doors to pure havoc and madness. Henbane brought about its visions, and I could have sworn that I watched a dinosaur-like monster glide across the water. Maybe it was like a Spinosaurus. At least that was what my mind interpreted it as. Since then, I couldn't escape this feeling that something was watching me. Or rather, someone. Gran moved closer to me and tried to cut my cheek, and gave me that frown which explained her concern. I've been listening, Leslie, and something is trying to find space to get to you. I can't let fear stop me. Maurice is waiting for my next book. I can't miss this deadline. You spend all of your life behind that computer. Well, think of this as my getting out. I walked around her and reached for my burlap messenger bag, pulling it over my head so it crossed my body. It would take a couple of trains to get to Sunflower's shop on the west side. That was only one of several things I loved about this city. Everything was only a train or two away. Growing up in Manhattan, and then continuing to call it home, it was a dream for many people. Wasn't New York known as the concrete jungle? People preying on others, while many hunted opportunities. Any easy opportunity. Life here wasn't easy either. If I failed at this, what else could I do? I'd never been afraid to walk around here. I'd never been one to run away from the threat of what could be. I'll be back, I called out, and dashed down the walk up to the lit-up night. Cars zoomed by, yellow taxis weaved through traffic, and the scent of fresh pizza from Giardini's wafted in the air. I should have come clean, but Gran would only worry. Luckily, she had to stay behind in the apartment. She'd worry if she knew the truth. I moved along with the pedestrian traffic toward the subway station, stuck my earbuds into my ear, pulled out my phone, and scrolled through my social media feed. It was the easiest way to stalk those whom I had no desire to interact with again. Just because I knew you in pre-K didn't mean we had anything in common now. I swear, social media is where dreams went to die. My phone chirped, and on the screen popped up my sister, Claudine. The apartment always weirded her out, so she wouldn't want to become my roommate if I didn't get this book done on time. Goodbye advance, goodbye being able to survive in the most expensive city. But all of that I could live with. I'd have to say goodbye to Gran. There was no way I could risk that. She was all that I had left. Are you on your way to the play? Claudine asked. She didn't even have to be specific as to which play that might be. My favorite actor was leading a show there, and surely on his way of getting an EGOT. Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Awards. I took it all with a grain of salt. He was so close, but I wasn't going to be that stalker chick. Plus, those tickets cost something I couldn't pay. Maybe I'd be lucky enough to run into the magnanimous Sam Dolomite another way. Of course, the post about him on my website had generated the most traffic these past few weeks, too. No, I have to go meet Sunflower at her shop. Just be careful. My feed is filled with Sam being attacked last night, roughed up and all. They found his apartment tossed and blood. Hey, I listen into the police chatter. It wasn't strange for someone to get mugged. I'd give her that. However, the criminal had to be an idiot to follow Sam to his apartment. Although Sam liked to play those moody parts, he was an actor's actor, meaning he went all in on a part. If the character was supposed to be able to carry AK-47s and shoot at mythological creatures, you could be sure that he'd be running in knee-deep water and know how to shoot. Sam had done it all, on the stage and film. From my recollection, he could shoot, do swordplay, throw daggers, perform kick-ass roundhouse kicks, and maybe even play the guitar. I'm sure he gave whoever it was a good butt-whooping, and his reps just have him hiding out until this blows over. I hope he was able to walk away, but the ones who did it haven't been found either. That wasn't strange either, depending on where it happened in the city. There were enough tunnels and all to hide those who knew about them. Well, fine. It's a full moon and people are crazy now, Claudine warned, her voice similar to my mother's. Passive-aggressive. Well, if... I paused for emphasis. If you believe in that stuff, Mercury is in retrograde, and I might even have a couple of stale fortune cookies to give you. This is all research. None of it's real. Maybe the more I said it, the more I could convince myself that I wasn't about to ask the devil to dance. Ha! Don't you find it interesting that your books are always calling you toward this myth and magic that you don't believe in? Faith was personal. If I told her I had a deep connection to the Norse gods, she'd think I'd either lost my mind or watched too many superhero movies. Which I loved, by the way. I'm in a hurry. I can't be late. You're doing this because of Dad, right? It won't bring him back, you know. I stopped walking. Death had been something I'd not wanted to consider. With all of the pomp and circumstance of his funeral, I'd only wanted another minute with that damned man. The magic and myth gave me solace where nothing else had. If Gran was still here, maybe he was just on the other side. Maybe I could give a little bit of my life and time to connect with him again. We're all grieving. I can't remember his voice anymore. It was the only thing I could say. We'd not had the best of relationships, and he'd been a major prick. But still, Dad. My dad. And now he was too far away. I had to do this. Damn the warnings, damn the repercussions. I'd open every door if it gave me another minute with him. Nothing I did could make the pain of loss go away. This isn't going to give you another minute with him. Claudine's voice became almost a whisper. We could talk for hours about all those dastardly things he'd done over the years, but still, at the end of the call, an emptiness and pain punched me in the gut. I have to try, Claudine. I paused to stop the tears I didn't want to shed publicly. Life could be fleeting, but it didn't mean that letting go was as easy or simple as a goodbye. I have to go. I'll let you know what happens when I get home. Hearing the swooshing of the subway through the grates on which I stood, I hurried down toward the subway station entrance. Rushing down the first set of stairs, I entered the main corridor, swiped my Metro pass, and pushed through the turnstile. On the landing, a man wearing an ultraviolet bob wig and an American flag bikini with roller skates loudly belted, "Rolling in the Deep." I'd seen everything living in this city, from half-naked cowboys to goths carrying real live pet ravens on the train like they were on their way to some magical academy or another. It didn't bother me. I barely blinked at it. But tonight, I paused. This guy actually had potential in the entertainment business. He shimmied, he twirled, he twerked, and sang on key. Naturally, people came to surround him, creating a circle and clapping on beat. At first, I was a little meh about it. Then he backflipped into a James Brown double split. A loud, "Oh!" raced through the gathered crowd. Part grimace at what was surely painful, and also because of the dirty concrete. The men grabbed their sensitive parts, and the women made ew faces. Yep, the subway had something for everyone. Sunflower would help me heal. If that required henbane, parsley, or poppy seeds, whatever it took, I'd reach out and take that step. Heaven couldn't be that far away, right? Chapter 4. Killian. "The vampires have forgotten the treaty," Killian said. He and Rose stood before Alistair's desk and watched the prince quirk his brown eyebrow. "You have this under control, Killian. I will wait outside and send forth all that I can to protect the key." Rose exited before he could even respond. Killian watched as Alistair waited until the door snicked closed before he might answer. As Killian's commander, before Killian could move forward with what he believed the best counterattack, he needed Alistair's approval. In the Highlands, off of Loch Ness, the castle served as the base for the Order, and Alistair was its resident lord. Alistair was slowly becoming the stereotypical castle grump, from what Killian noted. Things between him and Rose must have been direr than even he'd assumed. Killian knew the problem, though. Love made them foolish, incautious. Love created a haze that practically made them stupid, and that was not something he'd even considered when they'd moved from colleagues to dance partners. Alistair thought he'd be able to put Rose on a pedestal, and she'd bow to all of his demands. And Rose must have forgotten that Alistair was a demanding dragon who magically appeared as a muscular man. Killian could only shake his head as they sought to avoid each other. The relationship baggage they now carried around seemed to be pushed off on all of those around them, too. He cleared his throat, glancing around the room instead of at his uncle's brutal stare. Alistair was all business, and there was nothing in him that could cloud his judgment when it came to his role. Plus, Killian knew that his mother, the Dragon Queen, would have his hide if Alistair weakened and let the realm fall to darkness because of distraction. A circular blackened iron and mock candle chandelier hung overhead from mahogany rafters. Light, bare limestone walls contrasted with the dark wooden furniture and the red, blue, and gold Persian rug. Moonlight filtered in from the crenellation in adjacent window. A fire blazed in the massive fireplace. Alistair leaned back in his chair, barely fitting into the massive frame. It seemed like the more Alistair heard, the larger his form grew, almost like he'd been bench-pressing tractor trailers. Alistair was massive, no stranger to having to quash a rebellion or two. The power of the dragon shifter couldn't be ignored. The energy therein practically radiated. The more Killian spoke, the more Alistair's anger vibrated. "The treaties are there to keep our world safe," Alistair finally said. "These are nothing more than what we've previously dealt with." Killian cleared his throat. "Brother, this time they are after the book, or at least someone has been able to find it." When the first dragon arose from the ashes of Asgard, the gods found her so powerful that they sent her to Helheim and captured a part of her essence in the Book of Abomination. The same book that was said to free the vampires from the Order of the Dragon's chokehold. "We've heard this before," Alistair stated, matter-of-factly. They are looking for the key to the book, and the book acts as a beacon. Whoever has it is in extreme danger. Danger is all around us. Yes, but whoever it is can't do anything, Killian muttered. May the gods help us all. As if on cue, a bright light appeared, and in that beam, a woman with wheat-colored hair appeared. Her clothing white, and she carried with her a basket of apples. Both knelt at Freya's presence. She was the queen of Asgard, the goddess of the satyr magic, and the wife of Odin. Dearest children, I come with news. Freya waved for them to rise, sauntered toward Alistair's ornately carved desk, and took a seat on the edge. There is a reason that we are all hidden in plain sight. To have them disregard it threatens us all. Do we need to be reminded how it might be in an alternate version, alternate reality, if the vampires ruled instead? The Order exists to protect both worlds, ours and theirs. They might be hell-bent on destroying the peace, but we must do better. She stared at Killian. The vampires are talking about Asgir again, Alistair mentioned. Freya frowned. Yes, this is not the first time they have tried to free her. Free her? Killian asked. I thought my mother dethroned and killed her. Freya shook her head. No, unfortunately that was not the case. When the Dragon Queen was toppled, the heart devoured was not the heart that kept her alive. Killian, you are to head to New York. However, you are to stay out of sight. Do no harm to the key or its vessel. He didn't understand. The best way to ensure that an enemy didn't come back was to decimate it. Instead of responding, he glided his tongue over his teeth. Instead, you are to activate the pack there. You will need them to quash this vampire rebellion and to protect the key. She reached for one of the apples and tossed it to him, waiting for him to eat the fruit of longevity. In no way was Killian immortal, but as the son of the Dragon Queen and Fenrir, he had the best of both of his parents. He was a dragon-wolf hybrid, and his royal blood granted him certain gifts from the gods, including the opportunity to eat Idun's apples of youth and vitality. So far, they'd kept him strong, appearing no more than 25 in human years, despite his age of over 200. Protect but stay invisible? He asked. Yes, as she will have a part to play in the future which I've seen. She must have been powerful to open the book. What could this witch do? This is the battle I fear that will start a war between us all, Killian admitted. Alistair shook his head and looked to Killian. In his mind, he spoke to his nephew. If Freya requires us not to slice and dice this latest threat, she must have a reason, and we are not to question it. Killian gave a slight nod in response. That is why I am here, Freya said. What unfurls now is just the beginning, the 0 hour. This tightrope you both must walk. It will take me a couple of hours to get there, my queen, Killian said. No, kin, it shall take you no more than the blink of an eye. She placed her hands on his chest. Warmth filled him, almost soothing to his wolf. He watched the bamboo floor disappear, replaced with that of rainbow-streaked light, and the blaring horn of a taxi driver cursing him out. Get the hell out of the middle of the street, shithead! Killian stepped to the side, allowing the yellow cab to pass. New York City meant running with the other wolves, Odin's wolves to be specific. Hailing a cab would take too long. Instead, he pivoted left and broke into a run. He'd need Beau Charming's help. Chapter 5. Leslie. The grimoire sat unopened on Sunflower's coffee table. Black candles flickered, while a white feather fluttered with each move, and what Sunflower had called the blood of the sacrifice sat on a microscope slide.
You only need to drink this potion, and the worlds will open to you.
Sunflower blessed the purple vial with her athame and passed it my way. We just ordered dinner. I don't think I need something to get rid of my appetite. Maybe Gran was right, and I needed to change things up some. Ordering dinner from Jordan was a great way to whet my appetite without the risk. I could flirt while toying with the tip, and maybe slip him my number. There was this flirty dance we'd been doing. At least, I thought it might be. Then again, maybe it had to do with better tips. Could he really be flirting with me because I was a good tipper? My thoughts whirled, and what started as hopeful turned into a sinking feeling of yuck.
This isn't to eat, but to begin the transformation,
Sunflower said. Uncorking the vial, it smelled like onions, sweaty socks, and ass with a hint of garlic. Not something I wished to put in my mouth. Are you sure? I asked.
It only opens your third eye and awakens the magic already inside of you. Even now, I can see your aura practically glowing, acting as a beacon. The failed resurrection must have switched something on.
I wasn't sure what that meant. I'd seen things since I was a kid, and part of that being Gran. However, that of magical alchemy with sigils, Latin, and all of that, with sparkling and glittered rich air, was something out of Hollywood. Sure, the afterlife was real, but that didn't mean I could suddenly become a witch. A witch? Are you going to turn me into a witch? Sunflower threw her head back and laughed.
No, you are no more a witch than my familiar here.
She pointed at her bearded dragon, currently devouring fresh strawberries. So what does it do?
You can draw magic from those around you, taking on their properties. So, if they have some special power, well, you will be able to use it too.
Will it weaken them? Sunflower shook her head.
My aunt told me that this is the best way to locate your special powers.
Her aunt I'd heard a lot about. She did those late-night infomercials, the whole contact Madame Petulia to find out your future sort of thing. The future would be present soon enough. I was okay with discovering it without spoilers. The power to activate the spells in the book couldn't wait too much longer. If Madame Petulia was the real deal or not was debatable. Holding my nose, I opened my mouth and chugged down the greenish whey mixture. Thick in my mouth, my throat refused to work.
Swallow it, Leslie,
Sunflower ordered with a laugh. I flipped her off, only then to bang my hand on the table. The more I tried to drink this stuff, the thicker it became. Soon I'd have to chew it. Like one of those revolting weight loss shakes, I pushed through the horrible taste, happy to see the bottom of the vial.
It was only a couple of tablespoons.
Maybe she thought 16 ounces of yuck created the best penance for what I was about to do. My stomach spasmed. Sunflower then rose from her seat and drew a sigil on her living room floor. Stepping into the circle, different energy battered me. The air smelled of charred wood, like someone had lit up their fireplace. Suddenly, the untouched book opened. The pages of the grimoire rapidly turned, creating a slight breeze. The nearby crystals chimed. The music box on Sunflower's desk played an eerie tune until the page flipping stopped and landed on a spell titled Carpe Noctem. The candles flickered again, and I watched the words whirl on the page, as if waiting for me to speak them. The book practically called to me, wanting me to utter those words, pulling them from my soul. In the melody of the Humpty Dumpty nursery rhyme, I recited them as they appeared, understanding only resurrection mortuorum, resurrection of the dead. Boom, boom, boom! Shut up that noise, you two! Sunflower's neighbor from below must have been banging his broomstick on his ceiling. The room practically rattled. The dishes shook, the glasses clanked. Unbidden, Sunflower passed me the athame, and I sliced my palm, sealing the incantation with my sacrifice. A loud roaring lit up my head as if banshees shrieked free, awakened from their eternal rest. The words then lifted from the page, swirled before me, to come to rest on my skin, soaking into it like rain on dry land. The feeling of pine needles prickling my skin combined with sharp stones, until it turned to an uncomfortable heat. I glanced at my arms and saw what looked like black ink crawling up my veins, as if unfathomable darkness was prying its way into my body. It pushed me back into the recesses of my mind, so that I became an unwilling participant. The room melted away. I stared at this woman in white, with wheat-colored hair. It was like she wanted to tell me something, but her lips were gone, as though they had been erased. Her eyes were as big as saucers. An ancient drumbeat called forth something in my soul. It was night and day all at once. Both the moon and sun shone, and around me, Valkyries fluttered, swinging scythes. I don't understand. I shook my head. Her hands went blue, as if intense flames engulfed them, and a power I'd never known coursed through me. Lips finally formed the word. Fight.
Whoa, that must have been some good shit,
Sunflower muttered, fanning my face as I came to. However, now we weren't alone. 3 men were there with us, and one included the face I'd dreamt about caressing, Sam Dolomite. Or at least a close copy. Out of the corner of my eye, I could tell that they didn't quite move like normal humans, though. Your spell called us, one of the men said. He must have been the leader. He was gorgeous, like he'd been sculpted out of marble with sharp cheekbones. My weakness. His accent was English, and knowing my luck, he had a tragic backstory. Emo black hair framed his chiseled face. He towered, but it was the twinkle in his bright blue eyes that made me pause. My head hurt with danger. Whatever was in me knew that this was a fight-or-flight situation. My kindergarten street fighting skills were not going to get me far. Maybe I could bluff my way out. We've looked all over the city for this one, Sam, one of the smaller men said. I glanced over to Sunflower, and she must have fallen for their bait. Almost drunk, she stumbled over to one of them, tossed her purple hair over her shoulder, and leaned her neck as if waiting for a love bite. It was the canines extending on the one next to Sunflower who made me scamper backward. Vampires? These were not the good guys for sure. A knock sounded at the door. I smell Nigerian food, one said. I gulped. That was Jordan, whom I'd ordered dinner from for me and Sunflower to share. The ugly vampire ripped open the door, pulled Jordan in, and before he could react, attacked. I screamed, and the apartment shook. There was only one way out, and they'd blocked it. Could the blue magic from the vision be my saving grace? No time like the present to see how truthful it was. I couldn't leave Jordan here, though. Soon they'd both drain him, and then help would be too late. I raised my hand, but nothing happened. I thought this one would put up somewhat of a fight, said Sam. I kicked out, ignoring the pain. Seeing the silver athame on Sunflower's table, I snatched it up. Finish up, guys, as I think we will get home in time for a luscious dessert, Sam chided. He stalked forward, grabbed me by my hair, and yanked me backward. Darkness tinged my vision. With one quick turn, like a seasoned fighter, I pivoted, pulling his arm until it broke in two, and stabbed him in the neck with a ceremonial knife. I wanted him to die again and again. I wanted to resurrect him so he could feel my rage and kill him all over again. I moved forward as he stumbled backward. Crimson-colored blood bubbled like he was limestone, and the silver was hydrochloric acid. He'd not paid enough for attacking me. Punching forward through his sternum, I seized his still-beating heart and squeezed. The more I squeezed, the more he whimpered in pain. The edges of darkness and power were so tempting. The other two vampires left Jordan and Sunflower alone, dropping them to attend to Sam. The sound of the bodies hitting the floor with a loud thud cleared my darkened vision. What the hell was happening? My clothes were blood-soaked, my hands covered. This was now a crime scene. I couldn't get caught up in this. I quickly gathered up the book, and with a long, sorrowful look at a now dead Sunflower and Jordan, I dashed out the door. I was no good dead. Without looking back, I raced away. Chapter 6. Leslie. I couldn't have done that myself. Were those really vampires? Were Sunflower and Jordan dead? Questions revved up my fear even more. A stitch in my side, I pushed on. Shadows followed me toward the train station. In those shadows was something feral. The streetlights didn't provide enough illumination, and for the city that never sleeps, it was too quiet, like someone had cleared the street. Who were they? Why were they after me? The panting in my ears gave me no peace, echoing the galloping of my heart and quickened gait. I pulled my coat tighter around me, despite the lack of a chill. Tonight was not the New York I knew. This was mad occult stuff that Gran had tried to warn me about. I couldn't shake the image of that woman with the long, wheat-colored hair in my mind. Who was she? What was this power? What did it all mean? My only thought was to get away as far and quick as I could. I raced back toward the train station, into the public bathroom, locking the door behind me. In the grime and graffiti-covered single-room toilet, it stank of old urine and feces. Those were the least of my worries. I quickly turned on the water and tried to scrub away the redness on my palms, my jacket. I couldn't tell if it was mine or someone else's. My head hurt from the vampire's solid hold. There was no one I could call, warn, or even ask for help. Vampires were supposed to just be lore. This was so much more. If vampires were real, did that mean that all of the other creatures were too? I couldn't wait in the bathroom to find out. The quicker I got home, and further away from this mess, the better chance I had at surviving the night. I could think about thriving tomorrow. Far from calm, and now wet, I sped toward the platform, only to see my train chugging away. I just wanted to talk to my dad, but I was sure I must have awoken something else. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. My stomach churned. My palms grew sweaty. The black ink under my skin crawled, humming a tune that only I could hear. I would not die today. I looked over my shoulder, waiting for the nightmare to continue. The platform was eerily empty. Again, I looked down at my hands, and the blackness under the skin crawled. Did my fear activate it? Just as I pivoted to head back up to the street, I heard an evil laugh on the platform. And there, 6 vampires stood, including the 2 from Sunflower's apartment. Behind me, on the other side, I heard a loud snarl, and turned to see 5 wolves, but they weren't the normal kind. Larger than dire wolves, with thick fur and varying shades of gray, brown, and black, they stalked forward with their teeth bared. Was this a supernatural melee of vampires versus wolves? Where did I fit in this? With both exits blocked, I moved closer to the edge of the platform when the fighting moved too close to me. One of the wolves, which was larger than the others, his bite seemed even more brutal. His teeth were like razor-sharp blades, and every strike the vampires made against him bounced. He advanced on one of the vampires and practically snapped him in 2 with his bite. Taking 1 step too many, I fell backward. I flung my arms out, catching nothing but air, and landed with a loud oomph. In the distance, I heard the train's horn blaring, felt the track vibrating through my tan coat, and saw the train's light rounding the bend. "Help!" I screamed. But vampires and wolves were too busy scrapping to pay attention to poor little me. Scrambling to the side, too short to jump up, too out of shape to pull myself to safety, all I could do was plead for help. "Summon me," the voice in my head spoke. "Call my name. Call forth Asgeir." The tracks continued to rattle. The brawl now sounded like a cat in heat. My heart thudded in my ears. This was it. I was going to get smashed by the train. The lights appeared ever closer, the horn louder. I stared, paralyzed, and gasped for one last breath. The train's brakes sparked. One last scream was what I needed. I braced myself and held out my palm as if it could stop the train. "Asgeir!" Something within me cracked. The ground rumbled and ruptured beneath me. The tracks squeezed like someone had crushed a metal can and broke it in 2, as if bent by invisible hands. The melee behind me stopped, and the vampires scurried away. The wolves gave chase. All but one. A human hand snatched me up by the scruff of my clothes and pulled me to safety. "You shouldn't play with magic," the man said, and I could have sworn that he'd been a wolf only seconds before. With an athletic build, I never would have suspected him of being that powerful beast. His dark brown hair was slicked back. Large aviator sunglasses covered his eyes, and with a thick Eastern European accent, I couldn't tell if he was putting on airs. Nor did I care. He yanked me out of harm's way. I didn't want his name. I didn't want him to touch me. I only wanted life to return to what it had been before I'd opened up that damn book. I dropped to my knees, the book thudding to the concrete in my bag. "You have caused us many problems, seer." He leaned forward and blew white powder into my face, which I unwantedly inhaled. Was he a good guy, or a bad guy too? It was too late to know. Chapter 7. Killian. Killian carried Leslie back to her apartment, where he encountered an ethereal woman holding a cast-iron skillet, ready to bop him on the head. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm bringing her home." Finding Leslie's address had been easy after looking at her identification, conveniently found in her wallet. There was much he and his team would have to clean up to keep tonight's mess a secret. Even now, Beau and his men were scrubbing the apartment and the subway, correcting the narrative for the dead bodies and the derailed train. He could only hope that bringing Leslie back here was worth it. There was truly something about her, something that Alistair might even find intriguing. Holding Leslie, he could feel the power radiating from her, like rays of fresh sunlight packed inside of this seemingly fragile human. Despite the vampiric attention she'd gathered, Killian would have to extract or close the doorway which Asgeir opened. Still, she'd be able to see into the other realm, as that was the power she'd had before this mess. "What have you done to my granddaughter?" She leaned her nose in the air, and he watched her eyes glow, her head bow. "You are no regular man." "No, but be thankful I've come. Your kin use the forbidden grimoire." The ghost lowered the skillet she held to an antique table. Reality flashed on her heart-shaped face. Those in the supernatural world knew the consequences, even if this one hadn't crossed over. "What is your name?" he asked. She raised her eyes to stare at him. "I am Myrtle Davidson, but she calls me Gran." Some cowered under questioning, but not this one. Killian squinted. He knew that name, and of her past exploits. There weren't too many pirates like the legendary Myrtle. "I'm not here to escort you to the other side." He watched her visible relief replaced by renewed worry. "What will her punishment be? She just lost her father and—" Killian raised his index finger, silencing her. All family worried about their family members after death, and often the emotion created chaos. "She will forget that this ever happened, and you will be sworn to silence on the subject." "Surely you can't erase the burden of grief so easily. Leslie did it only to commune with her father, who untimely passed. They were not close, and at least she thought it was the only way to have one final word. Haven't you wished to have one last goodbye?" Killian couldn't deny that. Over the years, he'd lost more than his share of friends, family, love even. He clenched his jaw to steel himself against the emotion of loss that came so strongly. A memory he'd stuffed so deep down. He carried Leslie toward the room her Gran showed him. A room said a lot about a person. Her bedroom was no different. Heavy antique furniture practically overpowered the room. 3 of the 4 walls were covered with embossed navy blue wallpaper, with the 4th wall accented with shiplap that aligned with the oak flooring set in a herringbone pattern. In the corner rested a desk. He thought all writers' desks would be immaculate. This was the only area of the room where complete chaos existed. Papers messily piled. There seemed to be no order for the stack, but maybe that was how her creativity worked. He gently placed her on her bed and covered her up with a blanket. "I can help to keep her on the right track, but for that, I need to be able to leave this place," Gran uttered. "And you have an idea?" "Yes, my mourning ring. Make it so I can travel with it. Enchant it." "I don't have that type of magic." He heard Myrtle gasp and turned to find Freya entering into the room. "But I do." Freya moved forward. "What a grand idea. Your request is hereby granted." Freya's hands glowed, and when she stretched out her cupped hand to Gran, therein rested a gold and onyx Art Deco mourning ring. "Place it in the safe until it is needed." Freya turned her attention to him, and the room went cold. Killian collapsed to the floor, seeing Freya pick up the grimoire and hearing his grandmother's order. "It is time that you all forget this night. Even you, dear child. Asgir is free and must be dealt with in time by the order, but much must happen before the next skirmish." With Asgir free, he'd have to warn Leaf. A deadly rage was about to outbreak, and the Order and all of its members would need to be ready. "Instead," Freya continued, "know that the seer and wielder will soon be called into the fold. Take peace, Killian. You have done your job, and a good one." A feeling of peace settled over him, and just like he was transported to New York City, Freya sent him back to the comforts of the Order's castle, although remembering nothing but the peace the goddess gave. Chapter 8. Leslie. My alarm blared to life. I shot upright in my bed. Sunlight filtered in through the blinds. What a dream. the last thing I recalled was my dad's funeral. A sense of loss hit me. Since then, I'd been in my writing cave typing like a workaholic. 18-hour days to get this book done. Even now, I felt the ache from typing in my hands from my recent all-nighter. The deadline loomed, and maybe my muse was on overdrive. I rubbed my eyes to wipe away the sleep. I must have been so much into writing my book that my dreams had decided I needed to stay in that world while sleeping. It was the best answer I had for the dodgy memory, like a dream quickly dissipating. I glanced up and around. Everything looked the same as usual, except for the man seated in my old office chair, the one gift my dad had sent me at the beginning of my writing career. Sure, I'd sent him every newspaper clipping, everything that might prove I was worthy of his attention and his love. I needed him to know I was special, to not forget about me. I blinked to clear my vision, but the image of him seated there didn't disappear. His curly black hair was cut short. His brown eyes looked just like mine. He smiled, showing off his gold tooth, the tooth he always promised would wind up in my stomach. That scared the most out of me as a kid. The memory of childhood giggles mixed with his hearty, deep laughter hit me. I jumped out of bed and fell on my knees, hugging him. This was my 5 minutes. This was my moment of goodbye. "Listen, Leslie," he said. "Hear me. You have a grand destiny before you. Don't let anyone tell you if you have a seat at the table. I might not have been the father you deserved, but I never forgot you. I never didn't love you. I always loved you, even in my own warped way. There can never be enough apologies. You are my special child, like no other." He hugged me back, and I held him as tightly as I could. Tears raced down my face. This would be our last goodbye. "I now dare you to live, and live victoriously. You deserve the best, and I am rooting for you. I wish I could be there to see you step into your destiny, but I can see it there for you. You have that optimism from me, and Gran will take care of you to keep you on track. You will be happy. Take your place at the table, Leslie Marie. Take your seat. No one will give it to you." "Goodbye, Dad," I sobbed. Life chafed against me as if I wore ill-fitting clothes. I'd wanted to run away my entire life. I'd longed to be more, do better, find a tribe where I could just be me. And I thought I'd found it in the pages of my creations. Destiny is a flame fueled by hope. It pushes us to greatness. Despite seasons changing, the metamorphosis requires discomfort until we no longer feel the need to retreat. He couldn't be there when I skinned my knees, when I'd broken bones, or when life became overwhelming and miserable, and love seemed cold. For years we danced around each other, walking the tightrope between beloved and despised, or fire and ice. Crying on his lap, I realized the truth. No matter what separated us, the father-daughter love we shared would continue. In death, there is pain, life-stealing grief. But there can also be forgiveness. The gods had given me a gift, and I wasn't going to waste it. They'd heard my prayers, renewed my hope. They'd tossed me a lifesaver. What else did they have up their sleeves? With one final tight hug and kiss on the forehead, Dad's body slowly returned to its incorporeal form, until all that remained holding me was the chair he'd gifted me long ago. He disappeared. With a slight knock at the door, a letter was slid under my bedroom door from my literary agent, Maurice, demanding a meeting. Could this be the destiny Dad was talking about? This has been 0 Hour, prequel to the Order of the Dragon series, Written by Tina Glasneck. Narrated by Liz Brand. Copyright 2019 by Tina Glasneck. Production copyright 2019 by Tina Glasneck.